Hello, Wiki peeps. Welcome to this installment of WikiTree's LiveCasts, presented by Grandma's Jeans. I'm Mags Galden, and I'm joined today with our normal moderator of our chat and all things technical in the background, Emma Beth. Hey, Emma, thank you, as always, for being here. But the main reason we're here today is to talk about WikiTree's Australia project. And Paul Bech is not only a team leader, but he is the token WikiTree Australia fella. Hi, Paul.
Hi there, everyone out there in WikiTree world.
So Paul is the leader of the Australia project, and we're going to talk about the Australia project. I've got some slides to go through. If you have any questions, please log in and jump into the chat window and ask questions. Emma will grab those and put them on. I'm going to get us started here and share my screen. Let me get some things set up here. All right, there we go. And so today we're talking about WikiTree's Australia project. And I like it.
Cute.
Paul even smiled. I saw you, Paul.
You did indeed.
WikiTree's Australia project. If you don't know where Australia is, it's down way in the South Pacific. It's a beautiful place. And Paul, where do you live in Australia? Melbourne, right? Close to Melbourne?
I live 100 kilometres to the east of Melbourne in an area called Gippsland.
And I'm not going to ask you, well, I could ask you, why, how did you come to figure out that you wanted to do the Australia project? How long has the Australia project been around, and how did you decide to work on that?
We didn't have projects when WikiTree first started. They came in shortly afterwards, and I'm pretty sure the Australia project was the first or amongst the very first of the projects. So we were feeling our way back then, and it still shows a little bit of signs of that. So it's been a gradual process of development. Along the way, we got the idea of sub-projects. So it's actually divided into well, I should say the Australia project's really an umbrella for a whole heap of smaller projects of different aspects, like bush rangers, convicts, cemeteries, Kangaroo Island, one of the latest ones. So yeah, it developed over time. Well,
cool. And really, that's how projects probably do work. Real quickly, we're going to run down what WikiTree is. It's a community of genealogists or WikiTreeers working together to grow an accurate single-family tree using DNA and traditional genealogical services. You want to take the next one, Emma?
Okay. WikiTreeers collaborate. Collaboration of deep ancestors is between distant cousins who are serious about genealogical research and careful about sources.
And because WikiTree profiles are connected on the same system, access is easy for anyone to discover their roots. And WikiTree focuses on what we do best, and that is genealogical collaboration.
And
it's free!
Yay!
The price is right.
The price is right, absolutely. So as Paul was saying, Australia project's a top-level project, meaning it's an umbrella project for all the sub-projects that are underneath it. So, and anything with an Australian flavor. So if anyone wanted to start a sub-project within the Australia project, you would contact Paul and let him know what you're doing. You could start a free space profile, project profile, and start working from that way. Do you have a lot of people making suggestions for new projects, Paul?
Yes, we do. As I said, I guess my main role really is not to run the project so much as be that central point for these new chums who come along and don't know how to do it. So, as I said, a Kangaroo Island project has just started. That's an island off South Australia. And I was contacted by someone with an interest in it. And I just gave them some basic guidance, and then they asked a few questions. and now the project is just functional.
Well, cool. So to find the Australian projects, you click on the menu on the far right, the drop-down menu of Find, and that'll give you this bar, and you scroll down to the word Projects or Projects, and you'll see a list on the Projects page, and it will say that there is a project that's called Australia. Yeah, click on that, and it'll take you to this page, which will tell you the G2G tag, and it'll also show you who the leader is, which is Paul Bech. And you notice it says a co-leader is needed. If you're interested, contact Paul. I think that they're trying to encourage 2 leaders per project, so that's great. Also, a couple of lists of the sub-projects. We're going to get into that a little bit more depth later. But Paul, we can go down and talk about this. This is the join template, or the project information template that is going to be and is slowly being worked on into each project's page. And first off, it tells us the leader is Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
So, and I noticed that you don't have any coordinators listed. Is that because they're...
I still have to discuss that with them and find out. As I said, because of the sub-projects, trying to work out how to do this is probably the main issue at the moment. When you said there's no co-leaders, really it's a matter of the individual sub-projects having a leader. So in that way, I can't run it all. It's now a big lot of projects together. So I just offer the overall guidance. So I guess you could say really the co-leaders are more or less the leaders of the sub-project, but we'll work on this area here and see what we can do with it.
All right. And you have a brand new spiffy welcome feed. Bring that up real quick. You've got one today, or 2 days ago. You had somebody. So how do you handle that? Do you quickly give them a badge, or do you ask them questions to see if they're Aussie enough? You don't have to live in Australia to join.
Yeah, I haven't contacted them yet, but I would normally contact them first and just find out the background and what they expect from the group, as well as what we can offer too.
Well, and also every project has a welcome feed or a join feed, or should. So if you're interested in joining a project, if you put the name Australia and join, or interested in Australia, you would come up with this feed, this post in the G2G feed. I noticed that there were 68 members in the project, and I don't have the Australia project badge, but I do lead a sub project for the Australia project. So I imagine there are a lot more people involved in the project than actually have badges. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are some people that just want to do their own thing and are adding value. A lot of projects, not just the Australia project, have a lot of overlap. So your data doctors are regularly doctoring profiles in Australia, even though they may be in the US or in England or wherever. So it's a bit hard to say that. I mean, they probably don't necessarily want the Australia project badge as well.
Gotcha. And it's going down the list here. You want to add Australia to your list of followed tags, and that's the tags that appear on your profile page, and also the tags that appear in the G2G posts. And also, they do have a WikiTree Australia project Google link, and if you can see, it's probably pretty small, but the link actually takes you from the screen, actually takes you straight into the project, and if I wanted to join the project, I could ask to be a member by applying. Most projects have something similar to this going on. now we get down to maintenance categories. What on earth is a maintenance category, Paul?
Basically just an area where you can find out what's going on in the project. So at the moment, really, it's just a list of the sub-projects, and that would take you to more details of what's going on in the sub-projects. So
I actually have pulled it up so that we can see what it's talking about. There's one here that is probably not it's about Martin Farrelly.
Yes, so people will add certain things to their page which will draw to attention. So that it needs to be maintained by me as well. So yeah.
Nice. The Secret River Project. That sounds like a fun one.
I don't know about that one. I'll have to have a look at that.
Okay. So back to the list. We'll go right on down the Australia Projects Era list. Now this is fun, and this is a new addition for most projects for having it out there so people can see it. And I've just pulled up the Australia era list for the Data Doctors Project and for the Australia Project. And interesting, and your members of your projects, they can easily go over and underneath open click on unique name spellings. So Edith Dirksey, Edward Teddy the Jew Boy, that is actually somebody's nickname. If we go to the profile for this person, we can see that it's actually been entered as a nickname for the guy. And he was a bushranger, and that was actually his nickname. This is interesting. So you can go to the Data Doctors, the error report, and see stuff. I can't imagine that the error list or the suggestion list is going to show us all the possible misspellings of things, because I can imagine that there are a lot of Aboriginal names that would be really interesting.
Yes, the fourth one down, Truganini, was a Tasmanian Aboriginal, and that's certainly quite an issue in Australia because they were removed from Tasmania. So there's quite a bit of history there, and it's a bit of a, I could say, a sorrowful part of Australian history there.
So Tasmania is a different part of Australia. It's a
yes, it's an island state to the south of the mainland,
right.
Often omitted from maps, which the Tasmanians will often draw to people's attention. But yes, the Tasmanian Aboriginals were all gathered up and moved to another smaller island, I think Flinders Island, by a well-meaning person, but disease and lack of resources cause a lot of their demise. So it's one of those sorrowful parts of Australian history.
And we're talking about the era, the suggestions that we need to correct. And I'm looking at his project, and I just want to, or his profile. It's a beautiful profile. I love the background. And there's very little information actually in the fields, yet there's a lot of information written up in the biography and some great pictures. So, and then it shows us the whole island of Tasmania, which is kind of cool. Lots of information, even though there's not very much in his actual data fields up here. So not only could somebody go and look at the possible error or suggestion in the spelling, but they could also see that some of the data fields need to be filled out a bit. So that's
yes.
Cool.
Well, I must say I learned a lot of Australian history just through WikiTree by researching profiles that need attention. It's quite fascinating, the things I find as I'm going through.
And we just showed that profile, which needs some work. But every one of our projects is going to have this box, and it'll have a project that is a project profile that is an example of a really well done profile. Now, this guy, this Edward Kelly guy, Ned Kelly,
yes.
You want to tell us a little bit about him? I see something that looks like handcuffs and guns. What's up with that?
Yes, he was our most infamous bush ranger, well known for wearing a suit of armour when the police came after him. So he had a head piece of steel or iron and chest protection plates, and eventually was still shot in the leg or wounded and captured and eventually hanged for his crimes.
I have the page actually shows the suit of armor, and you can see it. What exactly is a bushranger?
I'm trying to think in terms of American history. The bad guys, the ones that rob your wagon trains and stagecoaches, and so yes, we had a very similar history here in Australia. People would go out and stop coaches and ransack them for money. Edward Kelly or Ned Kelly had problems with the police, so sought them out and even developed a manifesto and went to a newspaper and insisted it was published. So he had a bit of a political leaning as well.
I just pulled up his profile. I was curious to see why he was transported to Australia. The man stole 2 pigs.
Yes. Well, I myself, I have a First Fleet ancestor, Anne Forbes, so on one side. So I go back to the origins of European Australia on that side, and my father was Danish, so a bit of a mixture on there. But my First Fleet ancestor was sent out. I think she was sentenced to hang for stealing a bolt of cotton.
Wow.
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 The sentence was changed to life in the colonies.
Didn't they at one point cut off people's hands for stealing in England at one point?
I don't know about that. I haven't heard that one. Mainly it was quite a few sentences for death. I read about another relative in England who grew hops, and someone damaged his hop vines and was hanged for that.
Oh my.
So yes, it was pretty serious. But you have to keep in mind what was happening at the time. This is like the early 1800s. Revolutions in France and nervous governments in England. As mechanisation came in, they were trying to control the masses, so they were very, very, very heavy-handed about what they used to do. Right.
Emma, I see we've got a question. Do you want to pop in with that?
Well, there's a couple things. Lisa Kelly popped in and said she started The Secret River. It's
cool.
Based on a book miniseries / stage play, and it looks at the genealogy of the main characters.
Yes, I did say that now. Yes, I do recall.
And then Robin said, First Fleet, is that what you call the convicts now?
I'm sorry, say that again.
First Fleet, is that what you call the convicts now?
No, when Australia was first colonised by the Europeans, there were a series of fleets of ships that brought them out. The very first one arrived in 1788, a dozen or so ships, and went to Sydney Cove on Sydney Harbour, which was the first colony. And they quickly followed up in the next 2 or 3 years with the second fleet and the third fleet. And then it was mainly individual ships for, I think, up to about the 1830s, 1840s. So it's not all that long ago, really, that we were still accepting convicts in this country.
Wow. My comment about cutting off your hands if you stole something from England was a tongue-in-cheek commentary on the fact that if you steal a bolt of cotton, they're going to send you away from your home and your family and make you grow up on an island. Which
yes,
eventually turned out to be a pretty good deal for a lot of people.
Yes, actually, yeah, well, they thrived here. That's what happened.
The next one down on our list here is here's what other Australia Project members are working on, and if you go to this green box on the project page, you'll be taken to Not what I was expecting.
No, I don't think that one's really operational at this stage.
All right. What it does is it takes a snapshot of the people who carry the Australia Project badge, and it shows a feed of what they're working on daily. So if you want to see what's going on in a lot of the projects for Australia, you can figure that out by clicking that link once that link is active.
Yeah, we'll be in the next few days.
Okay, great. So moving on, I noticed that when you have the project goals listed on the project, I love this. Your first absolute most important thing is research.
Yes, absolutely. So important to have well-sourced, properly sourced profiles. So a lot of people who, well, where they may have, for instance, a convict ancestor, really haven't researched anything about them. So, or any other, like Australian Prime Minister, perhaps a relative. So yeah, it's important to add information. And I said the Australian Prime Minister was an interesting one. I originally realised we didn't really have lists of them, so I went and created them all. And other people have come on board and added family to them, and that's been a fascinating thing for me. How little we actually had Australian prime ministers. Most of them were either English or other nationalities. It's only more recently that, and actually we're having a problem at the moment with dual nationality in Parliament. There's been a lot of fuss about some people having dual nationality, which makes them ineligible to be members of Parliament.
Oh, that's interesting. That is not the case here for sure in Canada. So you've got Australian prime ministers as a research list, Australian convicts, which would be, I can't imagine how many descendants there are of Australian convicts right now.
Well, that's fascinating. I started a Facebook group for my Ann Forbes one, and I keep inviting people that I have, and I have something in the order of 250 cousins in that group, and each of those probably has several dozen living relatives. So at a rough estimate, I would say Ann Forbes, 5 generations ago, has probably in the order of 20,000 descendants.
Wow.
That are living today.
Wow. And I also see that the database era project, the database suggestion project, the database project, let's just call it the database project, has, you've got the WikiTree era list, which we've already looked at, and that shows up,
yes,
up here in the join, the join box, or the project information box. All right, so we've already talked about the fact that we wanted to take care of the prime ministers, and you mentioned the category. We can go and look at that real quick and see all of the great work that's been done. Is that the Australian flower?
The wattle, yes.
The what?
It's the wattle.
The wattle.
W-A-T-T-L-E.
The wattle. What is it?
Yes.
Is it a flower or just a grain? Or?
No, really a tree or a bush. Bit of a cross between the two. Responsible for a few cases of asthma. Not a particularly good one for a lot of people, but very pretty yellow flowering tree or bush.
So I see we've got you've got a nice party. You've got the prime ministers. You've got a link to a really good source for that at the National Archives. But looking down the list, you've got a lot of Australian prime ministers on here that people are working on, and that's great.
Yes, it's, there's I'm sorry, I can't remember our fellow's name who's very keen on doing that, but he's done some great research, and a lot of this is well documented, but I think we've even got some more that some of the groups like the Australian Dictionary of Biography could look at and take some information. So I'm very proud of the work done by the various project members. They've really added some valuable information.
I'm gonna while you're talking real quick, I'm gonna log in.
Yeah.
And, oh, come on.
my own favourite area is the cemeteries. So I know I've been out and photographed something like 80,000 graves, and a large number of them we've actually created profiles for, and not only that, but researched ancestry of them. So for each grave we've created a profile for, we've probably created a dozen or more ancestors as well. So we're probably into the hundreds of thousands of profiles we've added for Australia. A great resource. That is.
We're moving on to Australian Convicts, which is also a sub-project. So we're going to cover that then as well. Somebody was talking about the BBC, Jude was talking about the BBC tracking descendants of two sisters, both sent to Australia as convicts, one returned to England. The Aussie descendants include a prime minister, a judge. The English branch were still poor, while the Australian branch seemed to thrive. It goes to say that being sent off to an island for stealing a bolt of cotton may not have been as bad as it could have been. And
no.
They were asking if anybody is familiar with the show. Don't know. Oh, The Secret History of My Family is the name of the show. It's a BBC show, so there you have that. So back to the Australian convicts. We've got a category for them. Now, this is an impressive list. This is an impressive list. And how many people were actually transported to Australia? Do you know, Paul?
I don't. Many thousands. So it's a figure I haven't actually gone to look at. So even though we have a lot of them documented, it's a very small fraction. So yes, I couldn't answer that question.
I also notice up here in some of the interesting convict bolters. Is that people that run?
I would think so. Actually, I haven't read that particular one. As I said, it's a very large project, and there's a few areas I'm not that familiar with. So
let's see if the category tells us. Australia's first bush rangers were escaped convicts called bolters. They fled into the bush and survived by stealing from settlers and travelers. Some of the bolters worked alone. Others formed gangs like Ned. He had the Kelly gang, right?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
So convict bolters. And then there's another category that is escapees.
Yes, so, well, actually I have a third fleet ancestor, Catherine Edwards, who's quite famous in Australian history. She was an Irish convict and well known for, there was a story going around through the convicts saying that China was just the other side of the hills. So a group of Irishmen and Catherine decided they would escape to China. So off they went.
What's her last name? I'm going to see if I can pull her up.
Catherine Edwards. I'll just quickly tell you where she is.
On the list here, so
I can find that for you fairly promptly. Just a moment. Catherine Edwards is. Just find her as my ancestor. She is Edwards 400.
Okay. We'll go right to her. So easy to navigate WikiTree by putting in the IDs. Here she is. So she was an Irish roots person, and this is Yardley's Rock.
Yes, well, she had it was a bit of a checkered history. After luckily surviving the escape attempt, she was picked up by a passing boat all alone after they'd all separated, heavily pregnant at the time. She came back and either married or lived with a man. One night, the house burned down and the husband was killed. She was arrested for his murder, arrested and tried for his murder. because they found him with a crushed-in skull, apparently. So, but she was released for lack of evidence.
Wow. Wow. And there's actually a picture of where she was murdered.
And she was murdered in turn by her son-in-law.
Wow.
Those tough times.
The original Iron Woman, the original Australian woman. That's crazy. I'm just looking down and letting you scroll down through this. What a great profile.
Yeah.
Lots of great information. Nice work, Paul.
Yeah, not my work. Other people have done it. There's so many of my cousins who share this have done most of the work on that one. The other First Fleeter one is quite interesting too. That was and Forbes. That's Forbes 439. That's the one that very prolific number of descendants. We have something like 15 people who have DNA tested who match her.
Wow, wow. Look at that list of DNA testers. That's incredible. And
well, we have great hope. We have great hopes for this because we don't know her ancestry. We know she comes from around London, but that's about it. There's a few theories of who her parents were, and they're on there as uncertain. But hopefully all this DNA results will lead us to her origins and other family.
Have you started a DNA project on WikiTree for her?
Not directly. I've been keeping track for a while, making sure everyone I know of, I keep a record of GED match numbers particularly. And I think we will get going with a project and try and work out her connections back in England.
Yeah, that's something that the DNA project could really move towards. We have the DNA sandbox set up for people to give them an idea of how they can work their DNA and list everybody. It's really, really fun to do that and to set things up. If you guys want a little help with that, I'd be glad to jump in and help get her set up.
Yeah. Well, we've helped a few people there so far. The one Anne Valou there, I think she or her parents were orphans and she didn't know her ancestry. So she actually discovered, because of I guess because of all these people who have tested, discovered her connections to Anne Forbes and her family because of all these matches.
And because of the DNA, that's so good and so fun. Also, how we're talking about different projects. We're talking about the database doctors. We're talking about the DNA project, and we're talking about how those overlap and connect with the Australian project. That's so cool. And it's so cool that WikiTree is like that. It's so fun.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
so
and I even discovered.
What's that?
I discovered a relative only a few days ago in Salt Lake City, a fifth cousin through DNA.
Well, that means you need to come to Roots Tech, Paul.
Yes, I know. I'd love to get there. Perhaps one year.
So project goals, finding and updating Australian genealogical resources, which you have a great list of stuff going here. I also like the fact that the project has some important G2G discussions about genealogical resources in Australia listed, as well as some of the great ways that you can find information. I also love how the project has this set up. And if you want to know about the First Fleet, Third Fleet, and all of that, you can go to this page and find it and go to those links. And I guess we could follow one. We were talking about the First Fleet earlier.
Yeah.
There we go. How many people did they usually pack into one of these ships?
Oh, probably a couple of hundred into each, and they're not large by any standard compared to a current day ship. Crazy.
So I really like the way that these are set up. They're very short and sweet with just the basic facts. Nice. Also, adding Australia categories to WikiTree profiles and free space pages. That's an important thing. You see all of these great Australia categories, like your favorite one here, Paul, is the cemeteries category. Yeah. And what is the reason for adding categories to profiles?
It serves several purposes. I went to cemeteries one. I use it as basically a cross-check to make sure that we have entered everyone correctly. So, but also it can help people find, if you find on a profile of somebody, for instance, maybe looking for relations to that person. So it'll take it to the cemetery and you can browse the cemetery list or category list of people.
Right, I've pulled that up here for the New South Wales cemeteries. And also there's some direction on the category page that I love as well. But if you look, there's like the Aberdeen Cemetery, we'll just take the very first one, and it's got a few people here listed. If you're doing research in Aberdeen and you go to the Aberdeen Cemetery, you might find your ancestor by accident just by looking at the category page.
Yeah.
It's a great help. WikiTree. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you actually go to a particular cemetery as well, we have tables of graves, because quite often you can find a relative simply by looking at who's buried next to them. So that can be a useful way of finding things too. So we try and make it so that there are numerous ways to sort the data so that you can find information which you might be lacking. You have to find the graves there.
Here we've popped off onto the Find a Grave to the Albion Park Pioneers Cemetery.
Yes, we don't just try. We also try and list other resources for people that are looking for information. So under the cemeteries list, there's every other grave site that we could find listed, so that people can go there without necessarily knowing that they exist.
Right. And also the G2G tag, if you don't know about how you can actually pull up a list of questions that are specific to a project or an event, if you go to G2G and you look in your tag information, there we go. These are all the recent questions tagged Australia. And let's see, oh, look, there's one I really like, the WikiTree LiveCast with Paul Bech. Australians, have you discovering Anzacs? And this looks like someone who came across some National Archives about Anzacs. What are Anzacs?
Anzacs, it's a brief abbreviation for Australia and New Zealand Army Corps. So it's really a joint thing, not just Australia, but New Zealanders. During the wars, of course, we've worked together quite a bit, the two countries. So there's quite a bit of history there. Similarly, there's an Anzacs treatise, Australia, New Zealand, and the US as well. Nice,
nice. I just was looking at the chat. Amazing how many genealogists just love cemeteries. Craziness.
Oh, absolutely.
Another thing that I like about the project page, Paul, is this entry here, the research assistance in Australia, which is, I think it's just great. You can scroll down here and find help in New South Wales locally. Oh, look, and there's Paul. So Paul is an assistant in New South Wales. What do you do as a research assistant in New South Wales?
Well, the idea is a lot of people have that local knowledge or know how to use the resources. Having grown up in New South Wales and living in Victoria now, there's two areas I concentrate on. Not having lived in, for instance, Western Australia, I don't really know all the resources people might be using over there. So if I find people that do, I'll get them to list themselves, and they can then be someone that people can contact to try and find information that they don't know how to find.
Wayne Hicking says he hadn't realized you were in New South Wales, and I'm assuming Wayne's going to be giving you a call here soon to get to go and check something out at a parish or something. So that's fun. Now we're rolling on to the Australia. Are you game for that, Paul?
Yeah, yep, on we go.
No, about the doing research for Wayne.
If I can, I can't locally go there at the moment. As I say, I now live in Victoria, but I may be able to know someone who can assist. I often get that too, particularly with the cemeteries project. I get a lot of email from people who've discovered a relative there and want to know more. So a while ago, actually, I listed a profile, and that was quite a fascinating story. A chap here contacted me and said, "I don't know who you are, but this is my father. I've been looking for him for a long time." And I didn't know anything about him, but I had contact from someone else who was a member of that family. So I put them in touch, and a week later or so, I got a very great thank you notice saying, "Look, I don't know who you are or whatever, but I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I haven't met my father for 30 years. So it was quite an emotional reunion the two had.
That's great. That's great. Well, other than your fact that you're in Victoria now, Wayne says that you've been a great help to him already, and he's discussing one of his kids in the chat, which I don't know that I should repeat the name out loud since we're talking about children. But Wayne, he's saying thank you, but he hadn't said that. But yes, that's what he's saying. Thank you. On to the sub-projects.
Yep.
And the Anzacs. We kind of talked about the Anzacs just briefly. We'll go to the project page. And got some interesting GIFs going on. That's animated graphics. Let's see. Terry Wright and Irene Dillon lead the Anzacs project.
Yep, they pretty much run that one on their own. That's their particular interest in the military. So the idea is we try and tie it all together with the cemeteries project also. We try and identify those who had military service and link them into the Anzacs project. So as I said, there's a lot of crossover between the different projects.
The sub-projects, yeah. Australian Convicts and First Settlers, 1780. Let's see who that project leader is. That's you.
Yes. Although I'm listed as that, it's really run by most of the project members themselves. So there's a bit of discussion at the moment whether we should now perhaps separate these into two sub-projects, the Convicts and the First Settlers.
Well, were there a lot of First Settlers that weren't convicts?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first settlers that weren't convicts came along with as the minders of those convicts.
Gotcha.
So again, it's quite interesting when you find minders who, like the soldiers who marry the convicts. So it became a bit of a blur, and now there's a bit of discussion now that it's probably time for us to separate those two into two separate sub-projects.
Well, and when you start talking about separating a project that's a sub-project in and of itself, does that mean that there's so much interest in it that people, there's so much interest that there's so many people to work on the two separate projects now?
I think that's what happens. It becomes a bit unwieldy. I think if everything was just an Australia project, I don't think it could be handled. It would be just too difficult.
Right.
So I think there comes a time when you have to start dividing it up into sub-projects and just keep that overall umbrella where we try and put all the contacts through just the Australia project, and then people can look at what is relevant to them. But they work in their own sub-areas that way.
Right.
Quite a few people have no interest in most of the sub-projects, so they concentrate 1, 2 or 3 of them, and that simplifies matters. Right.
The next sub-project is a project that I lead, which is the British Home Children Project, and that affects Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, South Africa, and it's the United Kingdom's on there twice. But this is a project that is about the children who were orphans, who were sent to live away from their families. Some of them weren't really orphans. They were just given up for a short time because the family couldn't support them, and they were expecting to get them back. And they would go to get the kids back, and the kids had been shipped to Canada or to Australia. It's an interesting and kind of sad project. There's a home child in my spouse's family, which is why I got involved in the project. So that's a fun project for me to work on, and great for the Australian side of things. We were talking about the Bush Rangers, and there's a Bush Rangers project. They've got that's cute. They have a wanted reward. I think that's probably Terry Wright. Yep. Terry Wright.
Yep, Terry
has lots of graphics.
Yes, she does.
And Paul and Irene. And the Bush Rangers were the people we were talking about, who were the convicts who came over, who decided to be convicts when they got to Australia. Yeah. Emma, do you have a...
That's funny.
Yeah, the convicts who decided to become convicts. The Cemeteries of Australia, which is a project near and dear to your heart, Paul.
Yes, that's mine.
Yeah, talking about cemeteries, we've already talked about that a lot. You've got a lot of participation.
Yes, we do.
The Field of Mars. That's
that's a main cemetery in Sydney. It's a very, very large cemetery.
Cool. Earl Grey's Famine Orphan Scheme. How is that different from the Bernardo or the scheme that was the British Home Children as well?
This one I really don't know a lot about, so I might skip that one a little bit and have to do a bit more reading on that one myself.
I can read the description as between 1848 and 1850, 4,000 adolescent female orphans immigrated from Irish workhouses to the Australian colonies. Wow. Between 14 and 20 years of age. And they immigrated. It's called the Earl Grey scheme after its principal architect, Earl Grey. So next time you drink a hot tea, you'll know that he was involved in some not so great things. The Eureka Stockade is also a great sub-project.
That was interesting part of Australian history. It's really our first rebellion.
Oh yeah.
They created their own flag. This was the time when the gold rush happened in Melbourne, and just north of Melbourne there was a town called Ballarat, which grew very rapidly on the back of gold. And taxation was very high, and the miners decided to riot. And there was an outright battle held between the British troops and the Australian miners. So that became an integral part of our history.
Great graphics listed on here, and that's an interesting flag. Reminds me a bit of the Templars cross.
The Southern Cross, the constellation of stars in our southern skies.
Gotcha. I see that now with the stars. That's a cool flag. The explorers of Australia. Weren't all the early settlers explorers?
No, when the first colony of Sydney started, it was for decades they were hemmed in a small area by mountains to the west. So inland Australia was quite unknown, and the mountains were quite a barrier. They were mostly formed of very steep cliffs. So several people tried to find a way across. So it took a while before, I think it was 1810 before the first road was built over the Blue Mountains to the west of Sydney. So the colony started in 1788. As you can see, it was quite a while before Australia started to open up.
So the settlement went from southern to northern?
Well, Sydney started at first, and we're looking, 30, 40 years, I suppose, before there was much expansion of that. A small settlement, started in Melbourne, and they had trouble finding a location. They moved around a little bit and finally settled on the settled on the mouth of the Murray River on Port Phillip Bay. Much later became settlements in Western Australia, South Australia, Queensland. Tasmania again started off as a convict colony for quite a long time. It wasn't probably till the 1830s where it started to have some separate identity with lots of immigrants coming in.
I see here Irene Dillon, who is not listed as a leader, but I imagine she is. Yes, she is a leader of this project. She says, I have no explorer ancestors, but once owned a house built by an early explorer, so I feel a personal interest. That's interesting. That's kind of tying a one-place study into an Australia project. So that's cool.
Yes. Yeah, it is quite fascinating. And I say Australia is still such a young country. We don't have many. When we talk about old buildings, we're talking about 100-year-old buildings. There's not much existing before that. I remember talking to a Danish friend once when we had our bicentennial, 200 years of European settlement here. And I said, we're having our 200th celebration. And then he said, well, we're having our 1500th one for a town here in Denmark.
Wow. Yeah, and young countries, well, the U.S. is in Canada. I mean, there's only 300 years or 400 in some places. So, the last sub-project that's an official sub-project is the Indigenous Australian project, which is also a project, sub-project of the First Peoples project. And this is a new project that is just getting started, and I'm the project leader until somebody else wants to help out or give a project coordinator could actually be a big leader in this project. And it's to identify and work on Indigenous peoples of Australia and some of the islands around as well. So that's pretty self-explanatory. You've got one that's being formed that you've already talked about, getting the Australian Prime Minister's sub-project started. Any word on when that's going to be finalized?
Pretty soon. We actually have them all listed now, all the Prime Ministers. Just a matter of actually getting a crew on board to maintain it and to further it. So we'll have that one going very shortly. That
sounds great. Some of the proposed sub-projects are Australian artists, Australian authors, Australian towns and shires, Australian Aboriginal terminology. That could probably get started soon. If the person who wants to do that gets in touch with me, we'll get that started as a part of the Indigenous Australians. The Australian Gold
Rush. I might mention before you go on there about Aboriginal, the projects there. Well, one of the issues for a lot of Aboriginal would be the use of images. They hold them very. They're not usually displayed.
Right. And I think that there is an Australian wheel being displayed. It's an artistic display. It's not a person though.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Even the cave drawings.
No, of people. Deceased people. Of deceased people. So
there were a lot of people. There were a lot of photographs on one of those Aboriginal profiles. We mentioned the Australian Gold Rush. We've talked about noble and notorious people. We haven't really talked about any noble Australians. We have talked about quite a few of the notorious ones. And Australian Convicts and Early Settlers FTDNA project. I believe Veronica Williams was talking about that, which sounds really interesting.
Yes, she runs that. Yep.
We've got some useful links, and I'll post that here. Link to the projects page, to the WikiTree's projects page, and also just to WikiTree. And Paul, I have a couple of questions. We have to do the last animation here. I didn't put the little guy on there. I could go back to the very beginning. What's that?
Yeah, we'll have to wrap up soon, so we might start taking questions if necessary.
Yeah. I don't know if we have any more questions. We kind of took them as we went. I have a question.
Yep.
How did you originally get involved in WikiTree?
Oh, well, I've been doing family research since I was quite young, so it's probably 30 years. and I've had my tree on other sites. I think I had it on Genie for a while when it was free, and then it went non-free. And I think around that time I found Chris's project, and I think I added my 20,000 profiles in short order, which I wouldn't have done now. I would have added them more gradually, because I still have some unsourced profiles in there as well. And it's to my chagrin when people find them and say, well, this hasn't got a source. I know, but there's still a lot to do.
Yeah, there is. I think that there are a lot of people who are disappointed that they uploaded a huge GEDCOM and then are still cleaning up the mess. Emma's raising her hand. I know Aowen actually mentioned that in a interview that she did recently.
I come across Aowen's profiles occasionally.
Also, Paul, I know being a leader on WikiTree takes up a lot of time, and since you are a team member, you also work for WikiTree, and one of the things that you do is the open profile requests. And we could probably do an entire live cast on just that topic.
We probably will have to do that.
Yeah, we're out of time, and actually Paul is on a schedule, so we have to wrap up right on time. Yeah. Paul, I have one final question for you.
Yep.
What's your favorite color?
My favorite color is red. No, blue. Oh, sorry. A little bit of Monty Python there.
Yeah. And it is orange?
Yeah, of course, orange.
Of course, orange. Thank you so much, Paul, for being here, and really informative and good information on the project. I hope that you have some more project members sign up or help you get started on some of those sub-projects. We appreciate you being here, and you have any last words for us, Paul?
No, it's been fun, and I'm there if someone needs me, and I want more people to get involved in projects. Improving the Australian content is, I think, not just good for us, but good for people doing research everywhere.
It helps make the tree healthy. Emma, thank you
Onwards
for being here. What's that last word there, Paul?
Onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards, in the words of our great WikiTreer-in-Chief, Chris Whitten. Thank you very much for being here. I'm Mags Galden for Grandma's Jeans. Thanks for joining us for this WikiTree LiveCast. Bye-bye.